The Sirens of Titan really toes the line between science fiction, fantasy, literary fiction, and dark comedy. It is one hell of a weird stew of a book, but you're all the better for it after you finish it. The Sirens of Titan is an average-sized novel. It is 326 pages in paperback. That's approximately 97,500 words. So it obviously blows by pretty quickly. I've read two other books by Vonnegut so far. That would be Mother Night and Slaughterhouse 5, and I will say that personally, I do think that this is a bit of a step down from the both of them. Vonnegut's prose is really hard to swallow, not only in this book, but in each of the other ones that I've read thus far. It's not that he has strange sentence structure. His syntax is just fine. His word choice is just fine. There's just something about the way that he talks about stuff that is a little lumpy. He's not clunky per se, because he does say precisely what he means to say. The only other author that I feel I can genuinely liken to Kurt Vonnegut's prose, that I'm aware of at least, would actually be Chuck Palahniuk. Palahniuk was probably taking some notes when he read some Vonnegut. I don't particularly like Kurt Vonnegut's work. Even the other two books that I've read, I didn't particularly like them, but they were good books. At the end of the day, they had something to say, and I felt better for having read each of them. There was at least a little bit of insight I found in each of them. The plot of The Sirens of Titan is pretty absurd and all over the place. Again, it is a science fiction novel that toes fantasy and dark comedy, so we're going to see a whole bunch of everything in this book. Within, Malachi Constant, the richest American, is horrified to see that his nearly infinite wealth dries up overnight. He's offered a chance to relocate to Mars, where he is offered a position as a lieutenant colonel in the Martian army and all the benefits that come with it. When Constant agrees, however, he seemingly vanishes somewhere in the Mojave Desert, and his disappearance ushers in not only a new era for Earth, but for the whole solar system as well. Now, I love a good, strange, weird plot, and Kurt Vonnegut certainly delivers here. However, this book is nowhere near as action-packed as I usually like it. The Sirens of Titan was still well-paced. It moved along just fine enough, despite there not being the kind of action that I would typically like as a member of a modern audience. This book was written in, the 1950s. The first third of the book is pretty strong. I got hooked into the book pretty well by the first third. The middle third did feel like it dragged a little bit, but again, that's not because the pacing was bad, but that was just because the events that happened in the middle third of the book were just kind of boring to me. The end of the book definitely left me feeling a bit underwhelmed. However, that seems to tie into the themes that Kurt Vonnegut was going for. The end did not contradict the themes. The end was fitting for what we had, even if I didn't particularly like it. Reading Vonnegut is kind of like reading Hemingway, in that it's not necessarily going to be an enjoyable story, but it will be a good story no matter how you feel about it. At the very least, it will be insightful. I was rather shocked to find that, at least in my opinion, this was the darkest book that Vonnegut had written, at least that I have read so far, comparing it to Slaughterhouse 5, which notably included the firebombing of Dresden. Even compared to Slaughterhouse 5, Sirens of Titan I actually think felt sadder and a little more melancholy. The Sirens of Titan almost has an air of cruelty about it, whereas the rest of Vonnegut's work that I've read so far was a lot more buoyant and kind of fun. Even Mother Night, which ended on quite a bit of a downer, somehow Sirens of Titan even feels more of a downer than Mother Night and Slaughterhouse 5. There really are only two characters that drive the main plot of the story here. There are plenty of characters, but only two characters that particularly matter for the plot. Malachi Constant, of course, is the protagonist of our book. He is the richest American at the beginning, rather morally depraved. He doesn't have a problem finding as many women as he wants. He was a child of nepotism. He was given everything that he needed right out the gate because all of the money in the world that he had all came from his father playing the stock market. He definitely changes over the course of the book, and by the end, you almost feel pretty bad for him. Part of me wants to feel bad for him due to what we see him go through throughout the book, but it's hard to say for sure if you actually can, because again, this guy was born with a silver spoon in his mouth, so do you really feel that way? I don't know. Winston Niles Rumford was our antagonist for the book, and man, that guy's an asshole. By the end, I genuinely actually kind of hated Rumford for a lot of the decisions that he made. Winston Niles Rumford at one point pilots his ship into this thing called the chronosynclastic infundibulum, which I love that word. He pilots himself into the synclastic infantibulum. Because he does, he is granted the power to see into the future and into the past. I don't want to say too much about Rumford because I don't want to spoil much else, but he really is just a prick. I don't like him. There were several notable side characters in the story that I rather enjoyed. Noel Constant, which is Malachi Constant's father, we only get to see him for a little bit towards the beginning of the book, but the time that we get to spend with him is interesting. His chapters are kind of fun. Learning how he made his money is just kind of fun. Bose is one of the Martians that we get to meet. He gets stuck on Mercury for a long while, and I don't know, we're stuck with him for a while. I didn't care for him, and I also didn't not care for him. He's really nice to the little microscopic alien critters that they find on Mercury. So, he's one of the nicer characters in the book, one of the more morally upstanding guys, I guess. Solo is probably my favorite character. He's the weird little alien construct that's roaming around Titan. We're on to the spoiler discussion now. Starting in Chapter 4, Malachi Constant is no longer referred to as Malachi Constant, he is referred to as Unk. And of course, Vonnegut wanted to hide Malachi Constant's, his identity for the vast majority, and he reveals that Unk is Malachi Constant at the end of the book. It was important for the plot, I understand it, but it also kind of throws you for a loop. He does not explain it, he doesn't preface it or anything like that, and he just expects you to either A, pick up on it, or B, just wait until you get to nearer the end of the book when he reveals it. It took me a couple of chapters before I finally decided that yes, this was him, and I was taking that bet, and it turned out correct. Unk was Malachi Constant, but it was just odd. It was a weird choice, and I'm gonna remember it. I don't know if I like it. It was necessary, but it kind of still rubbed me the wrong way, regardless. The scenes that were set on Mercury in the middle of the book were probably my least favorite. I understand why they needed to be there. They needed to kill time so that Rumford could, take over Earth and do his whole religion thing. And especially the fact that Malachi Constant didn't even figure out what the problem was, right? The little microscopic, wall alien germ things figured it out for him. Why? Why didn't he figure... of course, he's a Nepo baby. He's, not able to figure it out, but, good God. It does tie into the themes of lack of free will and everything, so I get it, but just, again, I didn't particularly like it. I wish he would have found a different metaphor to have gone across that was, I don't know, just more attractive to me in some way. Concerning how I feel about both Rumford and Constant, it's kind of useless to be angry at Rumford. It's kind of useless to be kind of sad for Malachi Constant by the end, after he goes through his whole journey and has his brain scooped with the antenna put into him, and he becomes kind of a weird martyr on Earth and everything. After all of that, you feel kind of bad for him, and you feel horrible about Rumford. I realize that it's kind of stupid to feel angry at Rumford and sad for Constant, because there's no reason to. They didn't have any options. I realize that it doesn't make any sense to feel strongly one way or the other because they didn't have any control over what the outcome of this situation was. They were just kind of helplessly pawns in the whole situation. Or at least that's what's suggested is the case. Every time that Rumford suggests the future, it comes true unless he's going to be directly lying about it. So that implies that there is no free will. So there's no reason to be angry at them, but of course, I still am. It's very contradictory, and I'm stumbling on it, and I'm sure that's exactly what Vonnegut wants me to do anyway, so he did his job right, I guess. I was genuinely angry when Solo tore himself apart. After he finally revealed his message and then found out that Rumford was dead and there was no reason to reveal the message, and then he tears himself apart, I was actually, genuinely pissed off. That moment of betrayal that he gets from Rumford almost feels like the moment of betrayal we get from Vonnegut right here. You're gonna just do this little creature like that? He's the nicest creature in the entire book. Solo is so kind-hearted and A-okay. Why does he have... Oh my God, fuck Rumford. Seriously, I hate that motherfucker. Even though he had no choice, fuck that guy. I guess, does that mean that I have no choice but to hate Rumford? You tell me. I was very happy to see that Solo was put back together at the very end by Malachi Constant. If Solo died, I'm pretty sure I would have rated this book much worse than I'm going to rate it in a couple of moments. The very final scene is one of the only, warm scenes in the book, which is, a little contradictory because it takes place outside in the snow during the elements and all of that, right on Earth in Indianapolis, I believe. After Malachi Constant puts Solo back together, they get into a spaceship and fly back to Earth, and Solo drops him off at a bus station where he just freezes to death. But as he's freezing to death, he has this hallucination that Stony Freegood, the man who he strangled to death earlier in the book, who was his best friend, he hallucinates that Stony comes up to him, and they have a little bit of a conversation. And then Malachi Constant dies. Well, technically he dies, and then we're given the conversation, just given how the book is written. But, like, that's one of the few moments that actually feels kind of even slightly happy in the book. He's back on his home planet for a moment. He's with his best friend for a moment. He's in the quiet, in this, beautiful place where it's snowing. He died in the place that he more or less wanted to die. So, is that a happy ending? I don't know. Not exactly. It's I guess the least unhappy ending there could have been for this story. But generally, this whole fucking book is a downer, man. Both of the other books that I've read by Vonnegut were significantly less of a downer, were significantly less depressing than this one, at least for me. But that's all right? You don't read literature just to feel good. You don't read literature just for escapism. Sometimes you read literature to learn shit and to not actually feel good about things and to test your emotions and how you feel. And this is one of those books. This is one of those books that really did test how I felt. In conclusion, Sirens of Titan is not a very fun ride, but it's a good ride nonetheless. It's one of those eat your vegetables kinds of books where you're probably not going to enjoy yourself as you're going through it, with the exception of the little bit of humor that you'll find here and there. You won't enjoy yourself going through it, but it's still good for you at the end of the day. That's why I think I have to give it a B-. The situations within were memorable and very imaginative. The humorous moments rung just as funny as his other books, whenever they did get humorous as well, at least. And the thematic discussions herein raised uncomfortable but very valid questions that I'm probably going to be turning over in my head, at least for a couple of weeks. I will have this book on my mind for a while. Therefore, I give it a B-. Am I going to reread Sirens of Titan? No, actually, I don't think I imagine myself rereading this, unless I happen to be in, a book club or some shit, and this is what we end up getting to. It was a good book, a pretty good book. It was a fairly deep book, but it's not one that I feel like I need to take out and reread. As I said earlier, The Sirens of Titan is Kurt Vonnegut's second book, which I find kind of funny because I recently put out my second book. Surprise, I'm gonna sell you shit. Here I have The Circus, an American fantasy. Inside, Penny Robinson finds herself trapped in an enormous, otherworldly circus where capitalism is king, crime runs rampant, and souls are currency. The only chance for survival is to abandon morality and bend to the whims of the circus dictator, or risk her life and break the system she's become trapped in. I also have Portraits in Bloodlines. Portraits in Bloodlines is 23 short stories in the horror, fantasy, science fiction, and slipstream genres, among others. There's a little bit of everything for everyone in Portraits in Bloodlines. As you can see, I have a film collection behind me that is ever-expanding. If you're curious about that, head over to my wife's channel. She is currently documenting our collection process. If there's anything that you think I should read, please do let me know. I am always looking for new things to read. Chronosynclastic infundibulum. Oh, just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it?